So, um, what else? What else can I talk about? Uh, I've been pretty good, missing my girlfriend quite a bit. Um, but that's okay. That's okay. Um, my homebrew campaign on D&D has been really good in that respect. Uh, Helped me through a lot of hard times, and the fact that she appreciates it and is getting into it is really good. So far, what I would like to do is kind of chronicle what's been going on because the story is actually getting quite interesting. The first session was very different, very kind of different to what I planned, which made it even more interesting and introduced like a new character that has become like a character that I had in the back of my mind. Um, and what I want to do with it, other than the whole Star Trek thing that I talked about in the first part, um, which is to say, like, no, there's basically not going to be like gender politics or racial differences or anything like that. Like, nobody's going to resent each other because of race or gender. It's just going to be like they're going to resent each other for like capitalism reasons. Like, capitalism's going to ride high. Classism, classism's going to ride high. But you could be the same class as someone in different colored skin and nobody gives a shit. The reason I want that is in society today, we have classism issues that nobody talks about. Um, and thankfully, a couple of movies are coming out soon. In Australia, anyway. Um, there's a movie that already came out. Oh, what was it? The one with about the GFC, the global financial crisis, and the crash, and how the banks made out fine, but the people got screwed over. There's one with George Clooney. Um, that he's like got this financial show, and this guy comes in with a bomb vest, and he says, "Put it on." And you better listen to me. And you're like greedy and making money off people's financial disparity. And like after the global financial crisis, a lot of people made money because there was this fear of not having money, and some people made money like that. Like I think George Clooney, his character does in that show, how he made a financial show. Oh, this will solve all your problems, right? But there are other people who made money by ideological kind of focusing on who can we blame that isn't us, right? And for some reason, Occupy Wall Street failed ultimately because it became about it went off issue. That's the thing. It was a movement against the banks, and then it became about against racism and sexism and progressive stacks and shit. And it's like no, you're getting off classism. You're getting off like the rich versus the poor. Um, uh, it's like if Robin Hood started going, well, some of the poor are black, and it's just what? No, it's just the poor, and then the greedy rich people who tax people too much and bail out bigwigs. Like, it doesn't make sense. Uh, so so that's coming back, which is great because I think we've lost the debate really about that kind of stuff. Nobody talks about it. Everybody talks about race and gender, and they don't talk about it intelligently. They just repeat rhetoric instead of talking intelligently about it. Um, so yeah, there's that movie, and then there's another movie, uh, Steve Carell, um, and gosh, oh my mind is not working right now. Um, there's another one where it's a bunch of, is it reporters or something, where they basically figure out that the global financial crisis is going to happen. Those two movies are coming out. Like, one I think is already out in the States, but it's not out in Australia yet. And I really want to see both of them because it's a subject that really interests me. Um, so my campaign is going to focus on the haves and have-nots, and on slavery, and the different ideas of slavery. So it's going to have a bit of societal commentary, which I'm blessed with a girlfriend who loves that stuff, who really loves storylines that are more than Princess in the Tower kind of gets rescued. And it's going to have a bit of subverting tropes, but not in a feminist frequency kind of way, where it's contradictory and kind of let's just swap the genders around, but let's not just make a Miss Male character, and but let's literally, there's no way you can make a character in that way, in the way that they have. Um, Under their criteria. It's kind of crazy. No, my thing is it's gonna subvert certain fairy tale tropes and just narrative tropes in the same way that George R. R. Martin's Game of Thrones did. Spoiler alert for that. If you don't know by now what the Red Wedding is, that was a subversion of tropes where the Red Wedding was, well, what happens in a narrative context usually after a battle happens, right? After like a bad guy hurts a good guy, right? If we talk in simple terms, right? An honorable guy, you know. Well, the son takes the mantle and he goes after the bad guys and he defeats them and he becomes the king and all the good things happen. And it's like, not. I think George R. R. Martin was specifically went, that's what should happen. If I was any other writer in the past. So let's not do that. Let's see what happens because of that. It makes for much more interesting storylines. And it's not just about kicking someone in the foot, it's about seeing where the tale would end up. So I've got ideas of what I want to do. There are certain characters that are representations of fairy tale characters. The first character she meets is a druid named Zell. And she's bald and she's got this tattoo of golden hair across her body, which she uses in the spell Thorn Whip. Now, the spell Thorn Whip is like literally what it sounds like. A thorny whip shoots out and whips. It's an attack, but it can also drag people closer to you. Instead of that happening, because it's D&D and you can really play with it, and I really love this edition because it really encourages you to play with it, especially as a DM. It takes Thorn Whip. I took Thorn Whip and made it like her hair magically moves across her body and shoots out of her hand like a thorn, and it works mechanically exactly the same. That's fun. That's fun. She is Rapunzel. if Rapunzel had never been uh, rescued from her tower by a prince. And to make that easier, she's an elf. She's an elf druid who likes turning into eagles, um, most of all. And she wasn't powerful enough to turn into an eagle when she was locked in her tower to fly out the window high up. And she waited. She read these books, these fairy tales or what she thinks is fairy tales in her tower, and waited for a prince to come, and the prince never came. And so, after hundreds of years, right, that's got to do something to you, right? So she shaves off all her hair in a fit of just, oh fuck this noise. I got told this narrative, and it wasn't true. So she shaves off all her hair, so which captor can't climb up anymore, and the witch puts a curse on her that her hair will always be on her body, and that's where she gets that tattoo from. So yeah, she eventually does get rescued by someone who rescues her with Featherfall. Casts Featherfall. She falls out the window, lands softly, and then she becomes a kick-ass druid in the forest and vows to help him in some way. And this is all we know. This is all she knows. This is all my girlfriend knows. But this woman has a half elf son. And this half elf son, I won't get into all the details, but the person who saved her is the father. So it had to be a human male. So yeah. And I got all this backstory stuff of what her real, like, my girlfriend's character's past is. Her Fire Genasi ranger. We played through backstory. So if you ever want to do a single player campaign with, like, your girlfriend or a friend, just to test out the game, it's not that hard to do. It really isn't, and you can guide people through a story, and all you have to do is be good at making characters. I made up her father and this half elf, who's a warlock of the Archfey, and her dad is a bard, and I basically gear them towards supporting the main character more than being badasses themselves. Like, make them slightly badasses, and then and use the point buy system so that they're not overpowered, and have them as companions, like in Dragon Age. You know how Dragon Age has companions. Have them as companions, and let her choose, right? I let her choose if she wanted her dad along or not. And the dad gave her, like, a guilt trip because I didn't test the campaign that I created. And I'm like, oh, am I going to kill her? Will she not... Will I kill my girlfriend? Like, will she become level 2 in D&D? Or will her character die? That won't be good. So, yeah. But she didn't. She's trouncing all these zombies, and I'll get into that. There's stories behind that. Think of, like, 3 different stories in your head. This is what Chris Perkins, who's awesome, he does the Acquisitions Incorporated stories on D&D, and he's great. And he says, think of 3 world kind of stories, big arcs, and tie them into the character. That's the thing, you can tie a story directly into the character and their abilities a lot easier if it's one player. And if you have companions, fights shouldn't be that hard. And make it less about the fighting, less about the dungeon crawl, depending on your player. But I'm making this more about story, going through an interesting story, like a similar to how a Telltale kind of story would run, or BioWare. How story is important, how politics are important, and create an interesting world that kind of subverts a few tropes. Not for the sake of subverting tropes, but for making an interesting story that you haven't heard of before. And, little pop culture references, kind of taking pop culture or fairy tale characters and turning them on their head will be fun. So yeah, I'm excited for where it will end up, and I kind of want to make or hire someone to do some art and voiceovers, and I could script it. So if you've gone to this level of the video, I might make a separate video asking for that. But if you've come to this end of the video after 16 and a half minutes, good on you. And comment below with the word Firestarter to let me know that you've made it this far. Oh, by the way, speaking of Firestarter, her dad's name, Andrew McGee. Yeah, bit of a Stephen King reference. Had to do it. I'll catch you later on the Top Cats Layer or Lair, whatever.